Hello, my name is Kate Margetson. I'm a speech language pathologist and PhD candidate at Sturt University, Australia, and I'm delighted to share with you today a study conducted by myself with Professor Sharynne McLeod and Associate Professor Sarah Verdon, titled Influences on Bilingual Speech Development, a longitudinal Vietnamese-English case study. This research draws on data from the Viet Speech project, which was funded by an Australian Research Council Discovery Grant. I'd like to thank and acknowledge everyone who has been involved in the project, and especially the children and the families. Here is a little picture of some of our research team conducting our Super Speech online intervention program for children. Whether you're an early childhood educator, teacher, allied health worker, researcher, or parent, you may know a child like Princess. Have a think about the multilingual children you know or work with as I discuss Princess today. I'll be using the pseudonym Princess as this was what she chose for the research project. Princess was a 3-year-old bilingual Vietnamese English-speaking girl. She attended an early childhood education centre 3 days a week. She was born in Australia and lived with her parents, who were born in Vietnam, and her 3 older siblings. She had daily contact with extended family who spoke different Vietnamese dialects. This is important to know because Vietnamese dialects can differ in the consonants that are used to say some words. She spoke Vietnamese with adults and English with her siblings. She attended speech-language pathology, although not regularly, and had been diagnosed with mild English language difficulties. And she was receiving support for language skills, such as English vocabulary. So imagine you work with Princess and hear her say some words in an unusual way, not the same way you would typically hear 3-year-old English-speaking children say them. So examples such as, for scissors, she said tidja, for zebra, she said yiba, and for train, she said for Wayne. So you might be asking, does Princess have typically developing speech for a bilingual 3-year-old? Australia has always been and continues to be a multilingual society. There are over 150 First Nations languages. 22.3% of Australians speak a language other than English, and Vietnamese is in the top 5 languages spoken here. Yet early education, speech-language pathology practices can be English-centric. When we are looking at whether a child has a speech delay or disorder, research recommends that children should be assessed in all the languages that they speak. However, this is very challenging if you, as the educator or speech-language pathologist, do not speak the same language as the child. But take a moment to consider what we might find if we assess both languages. We need to decolonize our practices and look at not only how children are speaking in English, but also how they are speaking in their home languages. So what do we already know about multilingual children's speech development? Well, we know that it develops in a way that's similar to monolingual children, but not exactly the same. They may take longer or even less time to acquire certain sounds compared to monolingual children. They may have different mismatches, and by mismatches, I mean the way that they say words that do not match the adult target. Mismatches are not necessarily errors or mistakes if they resemble how most children their age would produce a word. Taking an emergence approach, we know that there can be multiple influences on an individual child's speech development, biological, social, and environmental. And 2 or more languages might interact with each other as they develop, as Parody asserted that we should have the expectation that interactions between 2 languages will occur. So the aim of this study is to explore various influences on the speech development of an Australian Vietnamese English-speaking child over time. We assessed Princess's speech 4 times, at 3 years, 10 months, twice when she was 5, and then again at 6 years and 10 months, using the diagnostic evaluation of articulation and phonology for English sounds and the Vietnamese speech assessment. She attended local speech-language pathology, mainly targeting English language skills, receiving a total of 16 intervention sessions between the ages of 2 and 4. That is, from before time 1 to after time 1. And as part of our Viet Speech project, she participated in a 1-hour online group intervention each week for 8 weeks, targeting speech sounds in Vietnamese and English and home language maintenance. And that part of our research occurred between times 2 and 3. We also assessed her mother and older brother's speech to determine whether the way that Princess produced some words matched the way that her family produced some words. And her mother completed questionnaires regarding her development. So our results. When we first assessed Princess at 3 years old, we found that her speech contained lots of mismatches, where the way that she produced many words did not match the target. She replaced or omitted speech sounds in many words in both Vietnamese and English, but the sounds she used instead were not typically what monolingual children would use if they replaced sounds. So this left us to consider, what are the reasons for Princess's mismatches? Are they true errors, or indicating that she has a speech sound delay or disorder? Or could they be explained and she actually has typically developing speech for a multilingual child? Well, where do we start analysing her speech? First, we need to consider the similarities and differences between the 2 languages that she speaks. So this is the International Phonetic Alphabet Chart. We can think of the 2 languages in terms of the consonants that are shared and occur in both languages, and also the consonants that are unique to each language that are non-shared. The consonants that occur in both Vietnamese and English are highlighted blue. The consonants that only occur in English are yellow, and the consonants that only occur in Vietnamese are pink. Here's another way of considering the shared and non-shared consonants when comparing Vietnamese and English. We found some interesting patterns in her speech. When we assessed Princess in Vietnamese, she used several English non-shared consonants, these 4. And then when we assessed her in English, she used Vietnamese non-shared consonants. Cross-linguistic transfer occurred in both directions. In addition, she used a consonant that does not occur in either Vietnamese or English. So fricatives like s and sh and affricates like ch, they are harder sounds and tend to develop later in children. Princess found these sounds the most difficult to say, but so did her mother and brother. When there was a fricative or affricate in the target word, this was when cross-linguistic transfer tended to occur. So what were the reasons for her mismatches? Well, some mismatches were developmental. For example, the th is one of the latest sounds to develop in English, so it was developmentally appropriate that at 3 years old she was unable to say it. A couple of mismatches seemed to be due to assimilation, where one sound is influenced by surrounding sounds. For example, switching the y to the d in yellow because d is produced in the same place in the mouth as all. Many mismatches were due to cross-linguistic or cross-dialectal transfer, like the examples given before, where a consonant from English is used in Vietnamese and vice versa. This also happened due to dialectal differences because she had been exposed to different Vietnamese dialects, which can use different consonants for the same word. Some mismatches were due to ambient influence, where it matched the way her mother or brother produced the word, so it was likely to be due to modelling in her environment. And there was only a small amount of mismatches that could not be explained by any other reason, and therefore could be considered true errors. For some mismatches, like this example with square, she said "coere." There could have been multiple influences at play. It could have been developmental, as children can take time to learn how to produce 3 consonant clusters, like square. It could have been due to cross-linguistic transfer, because consonant clusters do not occur in Vietnamese. Or it could have been due to ambient influence because her mother produced square as saware, which is quite similar to Princess's production. Or perhaps it was all of these influences altogether. Overall, at 3 years old, she tended to produce shared, early, and middle developing consonants correctly. Most mismatched productions could be explained by various influences that occur in typical multilingual speech development. Few of her mismatches could be considered true errors. Her mother was a little concerned with her speech at 3 years old. At time 1, there was still a question mark over whether her speech would improve over time or whether she would benefit from intervention specifically for speech sound production. When we followed her up and conducted the same speech assessments at times 2, 3, and 4, though, we saw a continual improvement in her Vietnamese and English speech over time. She could now produce all shared and most non-shared consonants correctly, and there was no more cross-linguistic transfer from Vietnamese to English. The number of mismatches reduced over time, and she had minimal true errors. By 6, she had age-appropriate speech in Vietnamese and English. The reasons for these improvements could have been due to one, some, or all of the following reasons. Firstly, improvement could have been due to increased exposure to English as she started to attend primary school. Secondly, improvement could have been due to the impact of local speech-language pathology intervention, although that mainly focused on language. Or our research intervention program, although that was only between times 2 and 3. Or finally, improvement could have been due to natural bilingual development, where her speech in both languages naturally improved over time. To conclude, from observing Princess's speech development over time, we can see that multilingual children can learn to speak multiple languages well and need to be supported in maintaining their home languages. Multilingual children's speech can differ from monolingual children at 3 years old, but this does not necessarily mean that they have a disorder. If you have concerns about your child or a child you work with, then refer them to a speech-language pathologist who should assess their speech in both languages, analyse shared or non-shared consonants, and identify the mismatches and the reasons for them. And then, after ruling all these out, then identify the true errors. This study highlights the importance of considering both languages, their interaction, and the influences on speech acquisition over time. Here are some references. And thank you for today. Please feel free to contact me at my email address there.